So it turns out differentials are a lot more complicated than I initially anticipated. When I tried to tune the perfect differential, I discovered there were way more variables than I could have imagined. In this video, we're going to cover what a differential is, how they can be modified within BeamNG, and other variables that may affect how they operate. And at the end of this video, we'll put all this information to the test by building the perfect all-wheel drive street car. So buckle up, it's about to get juicy. In case you aren't familiar with how a differential works, it takes one input and splits it into two outputs. In this case, we have our drive shaft, which splits into two half shafts leading to our left and right rear wheels. In BeamNG, if your car has a race limited slip differential, it gives you a couple sliders to play around with: power locking rate, coast locking rate, and preload torque. Power locking rate is defined as additional locking torque proportional to engine torque under acceleration. Coast locking rate is the same, just under engine braking, and preload torque is the static friction between two outputs of a differential. The higher any of these values are, the stiffer your differential is going to feel. We'll get more into how all that works later on in this video. As I mentioned before, power and coast locking rates are proportional to engine torque. For those of you who understand why this is a problem, your brain may have just exploded. For those of you who are like me, you probably said, what if I measured the engine's torque and adjusted the sliders accordingly? The trouble is, engine torque and differential friction are two different units of measurement. In Beam, it's pound-feet of torque and newton-meters of force. Okay, Alex, just convert those values. We multiply, let's say, 200 pound-feet of torque by 1.355 and get roughly 271 newton-meters of force. Since the locking rates are percentages, we can multiply 271 by 0.35 and we get 94.85 newton-meters. Great, so we know this value would be in addition to our preload torque, so we can assume that we are applying 174.85 newton-meters of locking force to our differential at our engine's max output, right? Dead wrong, pal. Well, kinda. You see, there's something between our engine and our differential that directly changes the power's output of our engine: our freaking transmission. Each gear has a different ratio, which multiplies the torque figures by a certain amount. That's a lot of math I didn't want to have to do, so I built a spreadsheet to do it for me. In BeamNG, it's easy to find our engine's acceleration and deceleration torque values. If our car has a racing transmission, then it's easy to gather the ratios for each gear, and we already know the values of our power, coast, and preload torque. If we plug all these numbers in, we can see exactly how much locking force is being applied to our differential. I took the values from cars I've built in the past and compared them to see if anything stuck out to me. Turns out the best driving experience in a rear-wheel drive car with sport tires sits around 200 newton-meters of locking force under acceleration and 60 newton-meters of locking force under deceleration. For front-wheel drive cars, I like to sit around 180 newton-meters and 100 newton-meters respectively. Under these two charts, we can see that the end results are largely the same, but our power, coast, and preload are completely different. On the left, we see values that more closely resemble a clutch limited slip differential, while on the right, we see what's known as a gear limited slip differential. Each has their own use case depending on the car, but in my experience, front-wheel drive cars prefer gear limited slip differentials and rear-wheel drive cars prefer clutch limited slip differentials. A clutch limited slip differential applies more static friction between each side at all times. This ensures that your car is stable through sustained cornering, regardless if you're on or off throttle. In a rear-wheel drive car, this makes a car that isn't afraid to kick its rear end out on throttle, but it also adds extra stability on low and high speed cornering. A gear limited slip differential applies more locking force gradually as the engine's torque output increases. In a front-wheel drive car, this lets the front end quickly regain traction off throttle and allows for some modulation in how you'd like it to behave. In low speed corners, the differential can act like an open differential, but on corner exit, torque will gradually be applied to the outside wheel, allowing for faster acceleration. So what about all-wheel drive systems? For me, tuning all-wheel drive differentials was an absolute nightmare. The fact that I only had a vague understanding of how a regular differential worked made it damn near impossible to wrap my brain around how a center differential could affect the car's handling. From what I can tell, all-wheel drive cars can reuse the same design philosophy as front and rear-wheel drive cars. The front prefers a gear limited slip differential and the rear prefers a clutch limited slip differential. Usually the center differential aligns with the rear, but it may differ depending on how much power your car is making. If you'd like to see how all those values look on the best handling all-wheel drive Civic Scintilla you've ever seen, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on an absolute monster of a video. Center differentials are designed to distribute power to the front and rear differentials. Whenever you change the base torque split of the center differential, you change how much engine torque is being sent to the front or the rear. This makes our calculations a little more complicated. Let's say we initially had a 60-40 split back to front, and we got our front and rear differentials to their optimal torque specs. If we change to a 70-30 split back to front, now all of our torque specs are all out of whack. So changing the center differential directly affects how the front and rear are going to operate. Hopefully I can find a way to share this spreadsheet for you to try out for yourself at home. If I did, there should be a link in the description for you to download it. Let's quickly break down how to address each differential shortcomings and apply those principles to an all-wheel drive system. Please keep in mind that anytime you adjust your preload torque, you must adjust your locking rates accordingly if you want to retain their torque specs. For front-wheel drive cars, to reduce understeer in low-speed corners, lower your preload torque. To reduce locking the inside wheel under braking, increase your preload torque. To reduce understeer at high speed corners, increase your coast locking rate. To reduce liftoff oversteer in corner entry, decrease your coast locking rate. To reduce the inside wheel spinning on corner exit, increase your power locking rate. And to reduce excessive wheel spin on throttle, reduce your power locking rate. For rear-wheel drive cars, to reduce understeer in high or low speed corners, reduce your coast locking rate and preload torque. To reduce liftoff oversteer, increase your coast lock and preload torque. To reduce oversteer on throttle, decrease your power locking rate. And to reduce the inside wheel spinning on throttle, increase your power locking rate. For all-wheel drive cars, the previous rules still apply, but for the center differential, to reduce understeer in low speed corners, reduce your coast and preload torque. To reduce liftoff oversteer, increase your coast locking rate. To reduce oversteer on corner exit, increase your power locking rate. To reduce uneven wheel spin on launch, push the base torque split to whichever side didn't break traction. You ideally want both to break at the same time. Increasing or decreasing any one of these three values has its trade-offs. Ideally, your job as the tuner is to find the sweet middle ground between those trade-offs. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all for every type of car, and BeamNG doesn't exactly give you all these numbers to look back on by default in the game. It really helps to have a chart like this to tell you exactly why a car feels the way it does. But in the long run, what you need to understand is that every car is going to have a different set of values. I highly recommend gradually changing things over time. So if you want to get the perfect tune, it's going to take a lot of patience and a lot of tweaking. I don't expect you to understand all this information right out the gate, so I'll put all this information in the description as a reference. Now that we have a pretty good idea of how to address common issues with each one of these systems, let's go ahead and put all this information to the test and build the perfect all-wheel drive sports car. I've already built what I consider to be the best all-wheel drive handling street car, which is this ETK I-Series. I absolutely adore this car, but for the sake of this video, let's restart and see if I can come up with something similar. For the base variant, I'm going to choose the 2400 Ti X TT Sport Evolution. It might be a little more powerful than what I want it to be, but that's okay. We'll detune it. Let's jump straight into slapping on a bunch of parts for the sake of time. We're gonna go up to an ultra heavy duty long block, ultra heavy duty engine mounts intake. We're going up to a stage 3 turbocharger. We have race parts all over the place. We're gonna go up to, I think, 17 by 9s. Let's go with the 17 by 9 Okodai PR02s. I think those look fantastic. Let's slap on the sport tires. Do the same for the rear, and I think that's about it as far as what I'm gonna be slapping on here. Let's get this up to 0.2 power to weight and increase our red line. Oh, I lied to you. We need to add on a race adjustable ECU. Let's bring our red line to, I think, 7,000, because I think after 7,000 the engine will grenade itself if we go too high, and we'll bring up the wastegate pressure to 16.5. I think that'll get us to 0.2. It does. If you haven't already watched my basics of street tune video, I highly recommend watching that as well. That'll break down my thought process behind tuning my suspension and alignment. It'll be the top link in the description, but let's get into the real juicy stuff, the differentials. Now that our suspension and alignment are sorted, let's see how the car feels under regular driving conditions, which for any avid BeamNG player, that's absolutely at the limit. It feels like the car suffers from a little bit of understeer. It doesn't really want to turn in as heavily under braking, but all in all, it feels really stable. I'd say I want to loosen up that rear differential just a little bit and see what that front is doing as well. Just for shits and giggles, let's set a hot lap really quick to get a feel for the car, and then we'll start changing some of these values. Let's do this short asphalt hill climb real quick and see what I get. I'm curious. We do have 3 previous attempts, but ignore those. I'm curious what the difference is between the default tune, which is this one, other than suspension and alignment, how much time we can gain from the final tune of this car. Can't see the countdown timer. It's fine. We don't need it. Feels okay. Oh, forgot. No ABS. All right. Sick. We might ultimately want to invest in some ABS, because this is quite a heavy car. Okay, now I don't trust it. I don't trust the car to brake as hard as I'd like it to. But as I've said before, in the basics of tuning video, you just need to learn how to brake. Take your own advice, Alex. Take your own advice. Ooh, the understeer's crazy. That could very well just be a skill issue, but I feel like it didn't want to respond to my input. At least under braking, it didn't want to. Ooh, these freaking cobblestone or brick walls make me so nervous. If you slightly touch them, they'll turn your freaking car into paper mache. Again, I just don't trust the car enough to hold up to my demands. Oh gosh. Turn, please. Thank you. Okay, what time was that? That was, where is it? Oh, a 133.691. That was a pretty good attempt. Did I understeer really hard there? I honestly cannot remember. Let me give it one more proper go. Let's see if I can get just a little bit of a faster time. Okay, I'm shaving off time here. That's a 131.937. Maybe I can go faster. I mean, the car isn't bad. My main complaint is that at times it just really does not want to pitch in. And I think one of the turns I relied on yanking the handbrake to get around it. But I think we could probably tune that out. I'm not sure. Let me give it one more. No retakes. See if I can get it any faster. Just gotta trust the car a little bit more. This is our hardest section probably. Oh, that would have been so good. That would have been so nice. Okay, well, at least we have a time that's pretty decently fast. The point that I'm making here is that it doesn't feel disqualified. That's funny. It doesn't feel reliable enough to trust it through a lot of these corners. So I'm going to stick with the 131.699 with a couple of mistakes, but that's okay. Let's see if we can tune those out. If we take a look at our tuned set of differentials, the one that I thought felt pretty good last time, the biggest difference is that center differential. So currently with the stock variant, the power locking rate is really stiff, and our coast locking is not as stiff. I bet if we turn down our power locking rate, which in turn would allow us to rotate a little bit more on corner exits, because it's going to be sending more of that power to those rear wheels, considering we're still at a 70% split, which I might actually bring down, to 65, but we'll take a look at that. I also noticed that our coast locking rate is really high for the rears. By default, it's at 102 in first gear. And typically I just look at what it is in first gear, because the rest of it will change over time. With something like a clutch limited slip differential, which this is more aligned with what it is, we're going to have a more consistent feel throughout the gears. And that's another benefit of the gear limited slip differential, is that it allows for a little bit more modulation between first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. It creates a bit of a different driving dynamic depending on what gear you're in. Let's go ahead and start moving some numbers around. I'm going to bring down our power locking rate to, let's say 50%. 50 Newton meters. Let's bring our coast locking rate down to 4%. Okay, that'll get us within the ballpark of 60 Newton meters in the rear. And our power locking rate, I'm going to bring us down to 19. Oh, actually, I lied. We should have changed our split. So 65. Power locking rate is going to go back up to 21. Just kidding. 20. I can live with it being at 45, at 245. Let's bring coast lock rate back up to 5%. It's going to bring us at a good round 60. For the front, let's bring our preload torque down to 20%, not 20%, 20 Newton meters. Good Lord. Coast locking rate, I'm going to bring up to 5%. I'm going to go half of 50 here because I want that front end to grab and rotate. We might change this later, but we'll see. And we'll bring this up to 25%, which will bring us at a good round 150. Okay, let's bring the power rate for our center differential down, because that is quite aggressive. 326 is quite high, at least in my eyes. Let's do 15%. Let's also drop our preload torque down to something like 20 or 10 Newton meters. Power back up to 16, so we can get somewhere in that 250 range. And then let's bring our coast locking back up to that 60-ish mark. Let's go to 20%. Ooh, 75, just overshot it. Maybe 15. Okay, that brings us at a pretty good 60. Let's see how that feels. Let's throw these numbers into BeamNG and take another lap. See if we can get any faster. Time to beat is a 131.69. So since we're putting 5% of the base torque split to the front as well, we should have a little bit of a faster get up and go from a standstill, which is quite nice. It definitely, maybe, I mean, it feels like it's pitching in a little bit more sharply. The change might be slightly marginal, just a little more predictable. Potential. We're still struggling with some of that understeer. Ugh. And the lack of ABS is making it very difficult. Come on, fucking rotate, please. What the heck? I'm just turning and nothing's happening. Ugh, that is a brutal corner, dude. Yeah, ain't no way. I don't love it. It could be better. We could make that front end power locking rate more aggressive, because if you notice, that front left wheel just spun, which I'm guessing that front right didn't go anywhere. So we might need to tighten that up just a little bit. Okay, most brutal corner. There we go. Come on. I over-rotated just a little bit. 131.649, which is our fastest, but we're still making mistakes. The front end isn't giving us enough power on corner exit. Probably has something to do with the fact that we're only pushing 151.39. We could increase our power locking rate for that front end. We still have a lot of understeer, which could be due to our rear end or maybe our center. So let's go ahead and drop the coast locking rate for the rear first. Let's drop our coast locking rate down to 40, which means this needs to actually come down to something like 30 newton meters, which gives us perfectly at 40, which is nice. I do want to retain the 250, so I'm going to bring up the 20% to 25. That's at 274. That's a bit aggressive, pal. Okay, that puts us at 254, which is nice. Let's bring up that power lock rate for the front end. Let's go to something like, actually, we're just going to up this entirely. So we're going to go to 40%, not 40%, I swear to God, 40 newton meters for the front end. Let's go up to 6% for coast locking rate, 8% coast locking rate. There we go. Get us up to that 50 mark. And let's go 35 for the front. Oh, that's way too much. Pitch that down, pal. Okay, 30% power locking rate for the front. I think I'm also going to drop our coast locking rate down to somewhere around 40 for the center to see if that helps with corner entry. And I think our power is pretty good as it stands, but we shall see. Let's plug those in and see how it feels. Oh, one more thing before I do this. I'm going to shift our brake front and rear bias a little bit more to the rear because I want to have a little bit of extra rotation. I'm going to go to like 65%. That feels pretty good. To that back side. I'm really just not enjoying that it locks up those fronts immediately, and there's nothing we can do about it. I think for the sake of giving our front end a little bit more grip, I am also going to be dropping my anti-roll spring rate to 80,000, our bump dampening to 10,000, and leaving it there so that hopefully the suspension soaks up a little bit more of those bumps, giving us a little bit more grip around these sharp corners. I like the rotation from that rear. I like that the rears are coming out first because at least I can lead where I want the car to go, as opposed to before the fronts would just lock up and we'd lose all ability to steer. Oh yeah. It started to feel good. It started to feel pretty predictable. Maybe a little too aggressive there. That's okay. That's all right. We'll shift it forward just a little bit more. It started at 68%, I think. We dropped it down to 65 for the front rear bias. I might bring that back up to 67. Oy, oy. Well, at the very least, the car likes to rotate now, which is nice. I'm a big fan of that. Oh, okay. Yep. There's a lot less understeer now, which is very, very nice. Oh, beautiful. You see that it actually started to rotate outward when we put some throttle through it? Oh yeah, that feels good. We got it down to 130. That's about a second off. And I think we can still go faster because we're still making a couple mistakes. In some cases, it definitely is user error. But in others, I mean, it's pretty clear that sometimes it is, in fact, the car's fault. If we increase the coast locking rate for the center differential, this will give us more stability on corner entry. But I kind of want the car to be a little more rowdy. I really enjoy how it feels on corner exit. As we saw before, if I was to put extra throttle into it, that back end will come out, which I'm a huge fan of. And I think since we put a little bit more friction to those front wheels, the weight of the car is listening to the front end a little bit more, which is awesome. Plus the ability to soak up some of those bumps with this suspension is quite nice as well. Let's see with these changes. Let's see how it feels just with that one simple adjustment. And if it feels really good, I'll call it a day. Oh, that felt really good. I really enjoyed how that felt. Because despite having a good amount of speed and being pretty close to that wall, the car was very predictable. in terms of letting it just rotate that little bit that I needed to get away from it. I'm in second gear. I'm usually sticking through third here. That might have been a little bit slower. It's okay, we'll see. Didn't feel that good. I feel like we could have gone faster. If anything, it's on par. It's 0.2 seconds faster, still with mistakes. But some of those mistakes felt like driver error. Maybe it was just the particular line I was taking. That feels so good. It feels much more predictable and responsive on corner entry, which is exactly what I sought out to do. Oh, that felt good too. It was just ever so slightly yanking that e-brake. Oh, I wasn't sure if we are gonna make that or not. Ah, come on, second gear, let's go. Okay, maybe it's that little group of rocks right there that I'm smacking. Oh no, no, I just over-rotated the littlest bit. You know, now that we have just a little bit of over-rotation, because we moved around that brake bias, we might be able to introduce just a little bit more coast locking rate to the rear end, maybe 45 newton meters on deceleration. That might settle out that rear end just a little bit, so I can make it at least a little less likely to kick out. Still downshifting really early because I don't trust the car. Trust the car, Anakin. Was pretty good. Somehow slower. I don't know how that worked out. I feel like I didn't make any mistakes there, other than being in second gear. That felt pretty good. In any case, I'm really happy with where this car is at. I'm enjoying that it's much more likely to turn in, which is quite nice. It feels pretty stable at high speeds, and for all intents and purposes, it's a little bit more predictable than it was before. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to leave this one here. If you'd like to try this tune out for yourself, there will be a link in the description to a GitHub, which will have all the cars that I've tuned in the past, at least for YouTube. Oh my gosh, which you can try out for yourself. Just go ahead and grab those zip files and drop them into your mods folder. You should be good to go. Each one of them is vanilla, so you don't need any mods to use them. It's pretty sick. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, be sure to smack that like button. Subscribe if you're new. If you're not new and you're not subscribed, what the hell are you guys doing, man? Just hit the damn button. It's not that hard. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.